So it's going to be a video on learning a jazz standard. It's going to be pretty easy. It's going to be a little long-winded, but I can assure you by the end of the video, you're probably going to know how to learn any song. And all these methods are ways that I've learned to learn a jazz standard, and these are things that have helped me learning songs up to my juries, because they're just, I have to learn a ton of them at once. And this turned out to be the best way to effectively learn each song in jazz standard with each chord progression in different keys and also in different positions, and also just being able to get the sound of the chord progressions down. This is stuff that I'm going to be experimenting in forever, basically, but this is how right now I can learn a jazz standard in a day if I follow all these steps. So, starting off, I'm going to be doing the song Limehouse Blues. Limehouse Blues is a really simple melody, and not only does it have a simple melody, it's got a public domain melody, so, helps me out. So the whole song, originally, it's the way that I've learned it, it's in G. You're going to hear this. Now, of course, that's the first verse, but you kind of get the idea. Pretty old stuff. Django Reinhardt did an amazing cover of it. I'd recommend you listen to it. Besides that, we're gonna look and see how you actually start to learn a melody, and you have to start learning all the chord progressions. So the first step to learning a jazz standard is, of course, learning the melody. The melody is such an integral part of the song. You may not think about it like that, but it really is, especially for a jazz player. The melody is built on top of the chords. And of course, it has to relate to the chord in order to sound good. But it also, it's a melodic line. If we learn how to build these melodies and how these melodies are built, of course, we can implement this into our own playing, Eventually you can get your own lines to sound just as melodic as a normal melody would sound on a jazz standard. Which is why with different genres, you definitely learn how the melody relates to the chords in order to get a real feeling of how that genre is supposed to be played, melodic wise. Starting off, the first couple notes. I'm not going to do this for the whole song, I'm just going to do it for parts of the song. The first bar, that's the first two bars actually. That's played over C7, which is also the fourth of the G, which is in G major. So because of that, let's start off with the first note. First note is an E. If you look at your arpeggio of a C major, and you think of the C major's C7 chord as well, the third is going to be the actual beginning. So that's why this melody kind of fits in, because it starts on the third and ends on the fifth. After the third, then it's the sharpened fourth or flat five. It kind of gives it that gives it a little bit more spice, and then you end on that fifth. So you're basically going from point A to B, which is great, right? Because that's what any good line does. You can hear the melody you can hear the chord very nicely. So anyways, you should go like what I just did there. Simple, right? Pretty easy. You just have to look at the note and how it relates to the chord that is underneath it. Now that, you just do it for every bar of a song. I'm not going to do it here in this video, obviously, because it'll take forever. But you do that in every bar of the song. Sometimes it's not going to make sense. Sometimes there's some heavy theory stuff that goes on with some melodies, and sometimes you don't really understand how it fits. Of course, you should learn how that fits, but you don't really need to understand how it fits. You just have to figure out where that melodic melody note fits into the chord, right? And that way, you know exactly how to play it when you go to a different key. Because let's imagine this: you've got the whole song down in one key. Well, what happens if you're playing with like a horn player or a singer? Now they want in a different key. You're gonna have to figure out how to make this work in different keys. And the best way you can do that is by learning everything in relation to the key or the chords in the key. So that leads into my next step, which is learning the chord progression. And not like learning the chords. Of course, you should learn the chords. Like the first chord of this song is a C7, but I don't think like this first chord is a C7. I think this first chord is a dominant 7 of the fourth chord of G major. Because the chord progression here goes C7 for 4 bars, then A7 for 4 bars, which is the 2 of the major scale of G. You know, dominant 7 instead of minor. Of course, this is you can imagine this is part of some mode or whatever, or not in G major 7. This is how I like to think about it, just because it's easier for me to figure it out. So instead of thinking C7, A7, I think 4, 2. 4 dominant 7, 2 dominant 7. And then it goes G major 7 for 1 bar, which is 1, major 1 for 1 bar. Then it's B flat 7 for 1 bar, E minor 7 for 1 bar. So that would be the third dominant 7. E minor 7 would be the 6 minor 6. And then it goes into the A7, which would be the second 7 again. Second as a dominant 7th chord. And then it goes to the dominant 7th chord on the 5th. And you can, do substitutions however you want. But now, instead of thinking of stuff like this chord, like C7, A7, I'm thinking 4th, 2nd, root, and I'm thinking in bar terms. And now, of course, now that I know that, I have that memorized. Once I put that with the melody, it all starts to make a little bit more sense. So even though I'm saying this as in steps, this is all something you should be doing simultaneously. When I look at a jazz standard, like fresh jazz standard, I look at the first bar and I'm like, okay, how does the melody relate to the chord progression or chords? You can do this in like a like chord by chord breakdown, but you could also do this in chord progressions and stuff. But this is more of like you have time to look at it. This isn't you have 30 minutes to perform this song sort of thing. This is more of like you have an in-depth view into a song. So after you learn your chord progression, you learn your melody, you're pretty much set with the jazz standard, right? You just have to practice soloing over it. No, you're wrong. Now, what good does it make to... there's chord progression in this song in one. I did this in one position, kind of. One way of playing it. Now, of course, as a guitarist, you should learn to play a song in different positions, in different ways of playing it. Especially the melody. You can either take it up an octave, lower it an octave. But something that I learned, which makes things a little bit more interesting, so you're not playing it in the same key all the time and you're challenging yourself, you play the major third up. is that you play it a major third up. So by playing it a major third up, you're actually making things a little bit more interesting for yourself. When you play this stuff in B, you're basically forcing yourself to play it in a different position than you would in a normal key, and you're also playing all these chords differently. Now, it would be cheating if you just kind of move from this G and you just play everything the same up here. That'd be cheating. So what you do is you play all the chords here. So the first chord in B major would be the fourth, which in this situation would be an E7. Now how do you play an E7 up here? Well, an E7's right over here. This is, of course, when you should have voicings pretty much under your finger. It'll make things easier, and if not, it'll actually force you to learn new voicings in order to play things all over the neck. Alright? Easy. Basically, by forcing yourself to play in a different position and playing all these chords in a completely different position than you were normally, you end up, when you go back to the original key, having learned more than you would have if you played it in the same key. You kind of had to force, due to restrictions, you have to force yourself to play in unknown territory, and now you know this song even better than you used to. Now, if you think you're just going to be playing it a major third up, well, you're wrong, because you're going to be playing it a major third down as well. So in this situation, it's going to be E flat. Of course, you do the exact same thing you would for the way you played it in B major, in the same way you played it in G major. Nothing really changes except you're still in the same position. So now you have to figure out all the chords that were for, E flat major, but you're going to have to play it up here. Now, in this song particularly, because E flat major, and you're up here, you don't get the delight of having the chord, the chord is not on the string, not on the neck anymore. Especially E flat. E flat is annoying up here. You're going to have to stick to the third string roots. We'll kind of go down here or go up here. But either way, you're going to have to figure out how to do all that sort of stuff. After doing this for a while, you're probably going to have a pretty good idea of how to play the chord progression and the melody, because you're going to be playing the melody in all of these keys as well. Now that you have all of that under your finger, you have multiple chord positions, because you're going to have the same chord positions apply all over the neck once you go back to the original home key. If you played the song in B major and your first chord was up here, right? Near the third string root, then when your first chord is up here, which is C7, all of a sudden you can move all the way up here. Something like that, right? You now have a lot more freedom and movement because you learned this in different ways. Now, here's the final part, right? You thought, got you again, you thought it was over, it isn't. And the last thing you have to do is you have to learn to walk a bass line. Any great guitarist, Joe Pass, Tal Farlow, all those guys, the way they got their rhythm is because they have such an intricate knowledge of the chord tones in a scale, in a chord. They just can hear it. And you know what makes it easy to hear? You make it easier to hear by thinking about it as a bass line. I don't know about you, but when I started jazz, I had the bad tendency of thinking of chords sort of like a piano player playing the chord. So instead of thinking A7, when I thought A7 for a bar, I thought piano player hits A7 at the first beat and it lasts for for 4 beats. No. You should think about it as a bass player playing chord tones or a bass line for 4 notes. Because you hear the chord, but you also hear it expanded. As jazz guitarists, we have the ability to play chord progression. We have the ability to play chords, but also single lines. Single lines is going to be a very big part of how we play music. Okay, here's how you'd start. In a 1 measure, 4 beats. First note is going to be a chord tone. Right, so you can make it the root, 3rd, 5th, or the 7th. But then, what you do is you play this. You can play whatever you want for those 2nd and 3rd beats, and even 4th beat, as long as the 4th note in that bar ends up next to the chord tone for the next chord. Right? So imagine I'm on the 4th bar of C7 going into A7. I'd be doing something like this. Something like that, or something like that. You have to do this repeatedly for every chord. And you play songs like this. You'd play songs just kind of going through it, playing this sort of semi-bass line. This way you build an incredibly strong sense of where chord tones are and how to get to them. And eventually you'll end up being able to do it in 16th notes. And you can play a whole song in 16th notes just like this. And then you can do it in 32nd notes, but I don't know, that's a little harder. But you do the whole song like this, and you're going to have the song locked down. There's no way you can do this and not be able to solo well. Because then in the back of your mind while you're playing over the song, instead of thinking like, oh, where's the chord tone? You already know it because you've practiced it so much. You just kind of know where it's going to be next. And you kind of know you pick up little tips and tricks on how to circle in on those chord tones, or different ways of encircling a chord tone, stuff like that. It'll give you a really good bebop sound too, right? Because if you know where the chord tones are, you can actually give yourself a lot of space until you hit the chord tone. It also helps with playing outside. Like, you can go as outside as you want as long as you end up back home, right? So if you got the chord tone stuff down, you got it down. You got the whole thing down complete. Now, easier said than done, right? This is something I still have to work on, especially with a lot of different songs. But end of the day, it works. If anybody's got any questions, put it down in the comments. Like and subscribe to kind of get all of notifications for future videos. I do covers of stuff, and I'm going to be doing more videos on this. So hope you guys liked it.